So I thought I'd add a bit of color by throwing on this mustard.
Splash.
Bit of color, yeah.
Tell me about yourself, Wame.
Well, I'm single. Let's start there.
How are you doing at home as well? Like, how do you keep yourself busy, and how are you maintaining your own wellness?
I've got this really lovely book. Oh, the last thing you need is terrible lighting. There you are. So this great book called No Friends But the Mountains. That's quite good. I also like this one. I've been wanting to read this one for a while. Dark Email. Yes. So that's been quite good. And of course, you can't go wrong with something other than the autobiography of the former American First Lady, Michelle Obama. So I've got that. So in case this pandemic lasts for another month or two, I'm sorted as far as the reading department goes.
So
cool.
I might just start off with, tell me about yourself, Wame.
I'm Wame Valentine, and I'm Fijian. I live here in Suva, the capital city here in Fiji. And I am a communications consultant. I'm a journalist by profession. And I've been in the media field for about 10 years, particularly here in Fiji and the Pacific region. And then I moved on to do PR work very briefly outside of Fiji before I started working in development space. So currently, I coordinate communications for an incredible project funded by the Australian and New Zealand governments called Pacific Island Food Revolution.
And we'll talk about PIFA more very shortly. But let's talk about Fiji. In terms of the voices in Fiji with regards to this global pandemic, everyone is affected by this. So what is the landscape of Fiji at the moment for COVID-19?
This global pandemic has affected everyone. And just because you're an island floating in the middle of nowhere, on the backside of the planet, as we do here in Fiji, doesn't mean, we're exempt from it. Our country, our government have responded quite proactively to this pandemic. And so Suva, where I'm speaking to you from, where I live, is currently on lockdown. What that means is no one is allowed to leave or enter the city, unless, of course, if it is of essential service. Fiji, like many other Pacific Island countries, we're a very communal society. We interact a great deal with family, with friends. We have a bit of a talanoa, as we say in Fiji, which is basically a yarn or a bit of a chit-chat, if you would, around some cover. And so, when you meet loved ones and close friends, it's not uncommon to hug them and embrace them and shake their hands and give them a peck on the cheek. So to tell Fijians, you are to refrain from that. For a lot of us, it took some getting used to. But I think the authorities articulated well when they said, look, because we're dealing with something very new. For most of us, we've never experienced this before.
Fiji globally is known for a really beautiful tourist destination. I guess you being in Suva, but obviously entirely the country itself, what does that mean for the tourism industry?
Well, the tourism sector has been hit hard. And yes, you're right. Fiji is usually known internationally as this, postcard perfect destination. And it is really, I'm quite fortunate really to grow up in a really pristine country and island home that I called home. But yeah, that was the first industry that was hit hard. And it's unfortunate because, most number of Fijians, particularly in the western coast of the mainland, rely on the tourism sector. And when our government had announced their plan, their COVID-19 budget plan, priority were individuals who are working in the tourism sector. And they put a number of measures in place to ensure that, that they're sorted for the time being. Our national carrier, national airline, Fiji Airways, has grounded most, if not all, of its fleet. So it's uncertain times for most Fijian families, and I can't imagine, what it's like, what many of them must be going through Something I'm glad that has come out of this is that people are beginning to start that backyard gardening. And, when I get to talk about the work of Pacific Island Food Revolution, I'll touch more about it, which is good because, we do want people to, Fijian people to start growing their own food. And I think a conversation that will start, once this pandemic is over is, food security.
I think that's a really wonderful segue into the Pacific Island Food Revolution in terms of food security and all the good work that you and your team have done for the last many years. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what Pacific Island Food Revolution is and some of the things that you're looking to do in the next coming months?
So Pacific Island Food Revolution in a nutshell is a communication for development project. We work in the space of food. Mainly we operate or we target Pacific Islands, mainly Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu, where we encourage them to go back to local foods. The rate of non-communicable diseases, NCDs, or lifestyle diseases, is quite high in the Pacific. In fact, 75% of deaths, Sarah, in the Pacific region are related to an NCD. That's massive. 75% is huge. And, these are diabetes, mainly diabetes, or, some heart conditions, cardiovascular issues, some cancers. So, to fix this, to fix these lifestyle diseases, an issue is your diet. One contributing factor is diet. And many people in the Pacific, many people in Fiji, sadly, eat a great deal of processed food. And so we as a project have decided, right, how we fix this is we'll encourage Pacific Islanders, we'll encourage people in Samoa, the Kingdom of Tonga, in Vanuatu, and Fijians to go back to the food that their ancestors ate. How we do that? We use communications, mainly reality television. We have a cooking show, a competition cooking show called Pacific Island Food Revolution, same name as the project. You could do cook meals at home with these recipes, and they're fairly easy. It's not something that'll take you an hour. We could show you how to cook, 5 simple recipes under 5 minutes, and that's what the show does. So that essentially is what Pacific Island Food Revolution is all about.
And so what does that look like now that we're having to shift everything to more of a remote type setting? Like you said, there's a lot of people potentially gardening at home and or interacting via video. What does that look like for the program, knowing that we can't get together in groups anymore to show the program and engage like that?
We were hoping to do a great deal of community engagement, where we would do, cooking demonstrations to different communities around the islands and at schools as well. That obviously is not going to happen now in light of this pandemic. So, we're putting the message out there. We hope to do so with radio soon. So, we're working with what we have.
And I think it's good because in a way, one would assume that if you're home and you're gardening, you can't necessarily go out and buy as many fizzy drinks. Let's try to look at...
That's the plus. That's definitely a plus.